Welcome to Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. A world where coming in second place is not an option, but where principle-centered winning is the only approach.
Good morning and welcome back to Government Contracting Weekly, where each week we aim to bring you tactics, techniques, and topical information to help you, the government contractor, win contracts, always via principle-centered winning. This morning we have here, at the end of this year, a very special panel of experts to help us look retrospectively back at 2012. Who are the winners, the losers, the important trends, and the takeaways that you need to help you, our viewer, plan for 2013. Each guest on our panel this morning is particularly well positioned to address these issues, as each one of them serves in a very unique way the entire industry. So they have a panoramic view. First of all, welcome to Brad Waters. Morning, Brad.
Good morning.
Brad is overseeing and head of the Government Contractor Advisory Practice, and also Anne Laurent, who heads up two analyst groups at our Bloomberg Government.
Good morning.
And to Gary Loyd, CEO of Centurion, that is growing rapidly and critical to this industry. Let's get right to it because we have a lot of information to cover this morning. Brad, if you look back at 2012, and indeed our entire panel, everybody knows, of course, we had a slump, we had a lot of lack of decision making. Everyone knows sort of those big picture general issues. But from your perspective at KPMG, working with all of your clients, what were you and the other partners seeing?
I think we are impressed that the industry knows how to respond to changing market conditions. 2011 was probably the peak year for revenue, and yet in 2012, at least from the quarterly results, you see margin improvement still because they have taken steps regarding cost structures, that sort of thing. They're preemptive in their approaches. I would say as well today, it's as much around positioning for a lesser spend environment going forward that they've taken those steps. But by and large, an industry that is effective in addressing wherever the government wants to take that industry in terms of the spend level.
So they just need decisions to be made and then they can plan around it.
Better clarity will certainly help them with their business decisions.
But you're
certainly
optimistic, it sounds like. You think the government contractors really are ready, they're ready for whatever's going to happen?
The senior leadership today is old enough that it went through the consolidation of the late 80s. So they sort of understand the playbook. I am not concerned about that. I think they are pausing in some areas to understand more specifics about where there will be changes in defense spending, for example. I mean, it's understood that with the withdrawal from Iraq and Afghanistan, certain expenditures in those areas will change. But in others, the pullout. But in other areas, it's not at all clear yet specifically where the government will head.
Great, thank you. And Anne, do you agree, disagree, or what are you seeing? You have a different perspective. Your analysts are looking at different aspects of the industry.
Right, and I've asked a couple of them, one on our Federal Business Intelligence team, Brian Friel, and the other, Kevin Brancato, on our Defense and Aerospace team, to help me out. And as we were talking about it, you know, it's quite clear that we're seeing a continuation of a decline in overall procurement spending, partly largely,
as everybody knows,
because of the
yes.
drawdown, right? We were at a peak in 2009, about $550 billion, and we're now coming down. The Office of Management Budget said, I think a couple days ago, that we're at somewhere between 512, 515. So, you know, pretty decent and continuing glide path down.
But even from OMB, it's only going to go down to about 500 billion.
Yeah, and you know, there's certainly reason for optimism. We have to look back, right? A decade ago, we're at twice the overall spend.
We were at 2002.
From a decade ago, so that's pretty good news.
And it's still a substantial
overall,
market.
Right?
It's still a vast market.
It's a huge
vast,
market.
yeah.
It's a huge market.
Vaster than anything else.
And you know, there's a lot of crying in the beer right now, I think. But overall, the news is, I think, good. And I agree completely about the fact that the folks who are leading these companies now have been through this.
They've been through
They've
recessions.
seen this movie.
Maybe not exactly, but they've been through the recession.
Sure.
They've been through the Reagan recession. They've been there, done that to a certain extent.
Sure.
What do you see, Gary?
This is a, you know, it's a historic year, multi-trillion-dollar budget deficit, and the budget pressures on our government contractors is just monumental right now. And when you look at that, is that going to drive revenues down? It could drive revenues down for our government contractors. That said, though, a lot of the companies that are currently right now in place making changes in their business, they're going to do fine. The changes they've made this year, and and looking at, well, where can they better compete with GWACs and IDIQs?
Yes.
What key markets can they go penetrate? What acquisitions can they make for, healthcare IT or cybersecurity? Those are all great moves that we see a lot of our government contractors making today.
So you think everybody's really sitting back and assessing where are the opportunities? What can we plan for? And what are the definites and the things that aren't going to be definite? What are some of the definites then for next year?
Well, I think definites for next year, I mean, you look the state of the game. You've got cybersecurity is going to be extremely
national
hot.
National
security. It's a big issue. I think when you look in places in DoD, for example, well, we know drones are going to be a hot market going forward. We know
unmanned vehicles in general.
Unmanned vehicles in general. We also know anything with helping and caring for our veterans coming back from Afghanistan.
Healthcare IT.
And reducing those healthcare costs. I mean, when you look at in the VA, what an opportunity, and healthcare IT, what an opportunity to get some costs under control at the same time helping our warfighters that are returning home.
Would everybody see that? Would everybody agree with those two areas? Any other areas?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, we're also seeing that there's tremendous interest in intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR, C4 ISR,
yes.
Some people are now calling C5 ISR. But regardless, Secretary of Defense Panetta had said early this year when they first revealed the new strategy that they're trying to protect, even though they're taking $487 billion of cuts over the next, 10 years, they're trying to protect certain sectors. Cybersecurity is one, ISR is one, their ability to mobilize quickly is one, special operations is another. So clearly they're trying to protect money even in an environment where they know that cuts are coming and and the defense is going to take more cuts than the 487 that they've already bargained for. It's pretty clear. They're going to try to protect these spaces, and I completely agree with Gary. Health information technology is another one. DoD and the VA are trying to create a joint electronic health record.
Yep.
That money is passing through an IDIQ, which are rather a multiple award
So really
contract.
that brings in all the big data for
Right.
every agency, basically.
Oh,
Well, for DoD,
and particularly DoD.
All of that consolidation. You look at Medicare and Medicaid.
Yes.
Consolidation of those data centers
is huge.
$15 billion contract released this year over a 10-year period. Great opportunity for government contractors.
And basically, as Brad has said, everybody's planning and everybody's getting ready for this.
Right, exactly.
Welcome back again to Government Contracting Weekly. Each one of our guests this morning has a panoramic view of the government contracting industry from a unique perspective. First of all, we have Brad Waters. Brad, good morning.
Good morning.
Brad is from KPMG and he heads the Government Contractor Advisory Practice. We also have Anne Laurent with us, and she heads two analyst groups at Bloomberg Government. Good morning, Anne, again. And Gary. Gary heads Centurion. He's the CEO there of a tremendously growing company who provides a lot of information to the government contracting industry.
A lot of information.
A lot of information.
A lot of business intelligence, a lot of analytics.
A lot of information.
Exactly.
So I'd like to really take a deeper look back at 2012. So when we look retrospectively, what's a singular moment, Brad, that sticks out in your mind as being memorable?
I would say that the initiatives that have been announced by Ash Carter, Under Secretary of Defense, actually begin to take hold by this year in the changing of the contracting methods, the relationship with the government contractors. And I think there was some measure of skepticism as to whether or not that would actually happen. So it was not tied to any one event, but it was a sea shift change in how the government wants to contract with the defense community.
The ramifications of that, really, for the rest of the year. And what would you say, Anne? Would you concur?
I would indeed. Better buying is now taking root. Better buying 2.0 has just been announced. I do think that it's going to be going forward. But for us, I think the most signal event is the fact that the president was reelected, which means that Ash Carter and all of the players there will remain in place for the most part. We'll get a new defense secretary, but it gives some certainty to the market, to a very uncertain
stability,
market.
yes.
Some stability and certainty to an unstable market, even though contractors may or may not like everything that this administration is doing, and they dislike good parts of it, particularly, for example, lowest price, technically acceptable contracting, which is coming
and
out of
Obamacare with the
buying.
cost of healthcare on top of that.
Well, there's good and there's bad about the healthcare reform.
Yes.
Actually, regulations like that always produce work for contractors, and quite a lot of it will be happening now that they know that the health reform is going to be in place. The Affordable Care Act is going to continue.
And business leaders want those decisions. So you're saying
they want
that
those decisions, but there is a lot of work that will be and has been flowing out of the implementation of that law,
particularly in the healthcare arena.
Correct.
Yes. And what about you, Gary? Would you concur with Ann and Brad?
I would agree, and mine's probably a little more focused on the budget. You know, Congress and the President were unable to agree on a budget. That's a big deal. It's created uncertainty in 2012 and instability, as Ann kind of alluded to. I think that said, though, I would just kind of share with you a few opportunities that are kind of highlights when you look at, I mentioned earlier, Medicaid, Medicare,
Right.
$15 billion contract over 10 years. You got HHS, CIOSP 3I. Another fantastic vehicle. You look at that, you have 54 companies, $20 billion contract over 10 years. You know, Navy Seaport E, that's another great vehicle. It's got an $80 billion ceiling on it. There are 385 new awardees in 2012, bringing the total about 1,800. And the Marine Corps are ceasing to use, and I believe it's CEOSS, another IDIQ.
Yes.
They're going to stop using that. They've already spent $3 billion on that vehicle. There's $5 billion of task orders currently underway. They're going to shift that to Seaport E. So there's some good opportunities in Army. There's some more in DOD and in DIA. There's other, you know, if you look at Eagle, fantastic award. You've got...
and that was a great award. And would you
Yes,
say, Brad,
great.
I mean, that was a great award. Were there big surprises?
Well, I think the challenge is that what you're really getting is a hunting license, because there are multiple awardees, and it's really an opportunity to compete in a narrower segment because you've gotten on board. I think that the challenge really becomes for those that won, how do they leverage that and actually win task orders as they compete once they're inside that award vehicle.
And KPMG clients obviously were probably competing on Eagle as well. Yes. What do you say, Ann? Would you say that that was a bigger surprise? What was the biggest surprise this year?
Well, there are a tremendous number of things that were surprising to lots of different sectors in federal contracting. But I did want to say one of the things that we have been watching very closely is the increasing use of multiple award contracts. About a quarter of the federal procurement spend now passes through multiple award contracts of one kind or another. The most effervescent growing sector of multiple award contracts, interestingly, is not the GSA schedules, which have remained flat probably about since 2007, but agency-specific multiple award contracts,
Yes.
like Eagle, like
Exactly.
Seaport
Yes.
E.
Exactly.
Seaport E, the
Yeah.
biggest multiple award
Exactly.
contract in government, a rolling admissions multiple award contract, which is interesting because one of the things that we see that happened in 2012 and will continue is a lot of protests and a growing number of protests.
Bid protests.
Seaport E is the
Yes.
way to avoid protests by letting everybody in,
Right.
right?
And
So nobody's unhappily left out.
And it addresses the better buying power initiatives in terms of creating more competition.
Exactly.
So that the
It does,
government can
yes.
say, we got fair and reasonable value.
And bid protests, though, weren't de rigueur, and they basically are now. I mean, it's almost anticipated.
Yeah, even though GAO is going to raise the cost of protesting, they're going to charge a $400 fee. I was talking to some folks.
Which is negligible, really.
Correct. Well, I was talking to
This is like,
some
oh,
contractors yesterday who
$1
said
billion
at
company.
$50,000 a pop.
Yeah, $400
to
what a penalty.
protest.
Yeah.
$400 isn't going to keep us
It's
away
like
from
it's like
it.
getting speeding tickets for 4 cents.
Correct.
The entire world was
Exactly.
speeding. Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, the real governor is being careful about whether or not you protest and the reaction of your customer.
Yeah.
It does not appreciate that.
But this was
So-
new in 2012. We really hadn't seen this before in the whole government contracting industry.
No, we
I mean,
haven't.
not to this extent.
You know, and there's some other things that are going on that I think are really interesting. When you look at some of the aggressive moves that like a L3 or Northrop Grumman
Yeah.
or Lockheed Martin have made, fantastic
Big.
moves because of the uncertainty, because of the instability, because of the budget pressures. They've made some great moves in divesting themselves of business units that didn't fit with their core mission. I think you look at Mantech, another great business move in divesting themselves of their commercial services business. They're getting ready. They've weathered the storm. They've made some moves. They're poised to do well in the future.
They're poised because, just going back to Brad's point, that kind of KPMG perspective, what they're seeing with their clients is those that plan are successful. Those that can anticipate this, and you just mentioned companies like Mantech and the others that have planned, and so they're doing well. Yeah,
They're doing
yeah,
well.
absolutely.
Exactly.
Yeah. Welcome back to our panel this morning of experts, and particularly we're enjoying the panoramic view. Each of them brings a different perspective to the marketplace. Now we're going to have a little bit of fun, and we're going to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly from last year, 2012. Not the ugly people, but the ugly issues. And Anne, I'd like to start with you in terms of the good, though. What was good about last year?
Well, lots of spending. Lots of spending in the market. We're up to twice what we were at 10 years ago in terms of overall federal procurement spend.
Over $500 billion now, still?
There's lots more opportunity than there was before, even in a declining overall spending world.
Yeah, what about you, Gary?
Well, I think even given the budget realities, there's been some good things that have come out of that. Contractors have looked at where can they gain some organizational efficiencies? What can they be more effective in delivering to their customer? Those things are happening. We're seeing it across the board with a lot of government contractors making changes internally to be more effective and more efficient going forward.
Yeah, more effective and efficient. Would you say the KPMG clients are doing the same things, Brad?
They are, and I think the difference is efficiency for the sake of winning and holding market share rather than margin improvement. The 9, 10, 11 was probably margin improvement focused, but I believe today it's about protecting your turf, keeping your market shares is the motivation behind that in today's environment.
Yes.
Absolutely, and when you look at protecting your turf, some advice to government contractors, start that process early on. Don't wait till the end of their contract to declare victory and yes, I can do it cheaper now in the future. Start working that problem to instill some confidence in the government customer.
So you're talking with your customers, it's a dialogue.
Credibility.
Yes, and they know.
And we saw some of that. We saw some of that starting in 2012.
So as an incumbent, that's one of the things you should be doing.
Absolutely.
What about the bad from last year, though, Anne?
Well, I would say one sector of bad is construction. The federal construction contract space fell about $20 billion. We saw the tail off of stimulus spending. So in that space, a lot of pain. I was surprised to see that in the decline of overall spend, OMB just reported that the civilian sector dropped 7%, while DoD only 3.5, which was bad for the civilian side contractors, not quite as painful for the defense contractors, but of course they're looking out to some significant contraction.
Right, and not that that's not bad, so nobody can disagree with that, Gary, but what would you say was sort of the most bad from 2012?
Well, I mean, the most bad, I always come back to delivery. How can our government contractors be more effective delivering to their end customer? So a lot of the smart companies have made adjustments internally, but if you make those adjustments, you cut too deep, then you stand the risk of affecting company performance and delivery for your end customer. So,
which can be bad in terms of the deliverable.
Which can be bad for the deliverable.
And bad for the government and the taxpayer in the long run.
Government, bad for the taxpayer going forward.
Yes.
That said, though, a lot of the companies and a lot of our clients, of which we're approaching 1,000 clients, a lot of our clients are making those smart moves. And it's fantastic, and we're offering some support to help them make those good decisions going forward.
And that's actually one of the things that Brad had said earlier, and that the KPMG clients, you see a lot of them are making smart moves. What else was bad, Brad?
Well, I think that we would have seen far more M&A activity as a part of positioning and wringing out excess cost structure and capability that will be in front of us if there was a clear line of sight as to where we were headed. And so I would have expected there was more of that type of activity, and I think that would have been good if it had been able to occur.
But it was bad because
I think contractors are not quite sure where to place their bets when it's that sort of an outcome.
So the lack of decisiveness made it even more bad, basically.
But right, and some of that, I think I agree, Brad. But you've got some companies out there who've made some bets. So you look at CACI, for example,
who did
aerospace and defense. They made some key acquisitions. It's going to help them in healthcare IT. It's going to help them across the civilian agencies to extend their footprint.
And it seemed like every government contractor was trying to get into cybersecurity. Everyone was trying to acquire some of those skills. But what was really ugly, Anne? What did you think this past year? I mean, really ugly.
The S word.
Yes.
Sequestration.
Yeah.
Much uncertainty. Provoked companies to not do M&A, to hang on to huge amounts of cash.
Yes.
They're all, there's this pent-up M&A demand.
What do they say? Apple has more federal cash reserves than the federal government? I mean, that's
and
Lockheed too,
right.
billions. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. So that was ugly. Protest situation is quite ugly. Much more contention. I think we're going to see that also continue and possibly get bigger because, let's face it, the big multi-billion-dollar deals are fewer.
That's
and
right.
scarcer.
And they're going to be fewer and scarcer.
That's also driving pressure down. So, the big systems integrators are coming down. I was listening to a call with CACI actually the other day, And they were saying, you know, we're starting to see the big systems integrators in our
Encroach
traditional
in your
space of
space.
100,
Exactly.
200
Yes.
million dollar deals because, hey, they're on the hunt.
Right.
There's a lot of pressure on profit. There's a lot of pressure on margins. You're seeing companies break up for that reason.
Like
move into,
SAIC,
Well, the margins are
made
just too
that-
small, and
made
the
a great
government doesn't want.
SAIC,
What are they going to do
L3?
when there's no government contractors because the margins are so small and no one wants to be in this industry? Gary, what was really ugly from this
Well,
year?
you know,
really
you're
ugly.
asking the eternal optimist.
Come on, get ugly. What's going to be ugly? What was ugly?
You know, it was a challenging year.
Yeah.
There was a lot of pressure put on our government contractors.
What was it the Queen once said? Annus horribilis. This was a horrible year. Yes.
I wouldn't say horrible year. I would say course correction year.
Okay.
And things needed to happen in government with our government contractors and with the agencies, and those things are happening. As painful as they are, it's happening. That's a good thing. I think
Yeah.
when you look at what Ann was talking about with split of SAIC, that was a good move. But when you look at the people that are affected there in that split,
It's
a lot of uncertainty,
ugly
more
for the
uncertainty.
people.
It's
People,
really challenging.
yeah.
And so I come down to kind of the grassroots level, the individuals that are actually on site delivering on these programs.
Yeah, and it's been ugly for them. Really
been
ugly
ugly
for
for them,
employees.
yeah.
Brad, what else? Really ugly from the KPMG
Well, I'm going to give you a
angle.
contrarian answer, which is the really ugly thing that did not happen, which
Yes.
is we did not have the government attempt to make a major fixed price R&D award. We did that 20 years ago.
But not this year. No,
I think
nothing
the
in 12.
lesson learned about how to move forward, you see some evidence that I find encouraging for things that did not happen.
Okay. And what do you think for now we should be thinking grateful for 2012? What do you think?
For 2012, I mean, it's just, you know, it's throttling back. It's making those adjustments. It's identifying those core businesses that are focused in line with your mission. It's looking at realigning. It's finding those key acquisitions that make sense, that are high niche profit businesses that can come in and augment what you currently have, that where margins are being squeezed.
Right. So hopefully margins won't be as squeezed in the future. Yeah. So looking back on 2012, to loosely paraphrase President Reagan, was there anything you can look at and say that we were better off at the end of the year than we were at the beginning? Gary, what do you think?
Well, I do think we're better off than we were in the
Really?
beginning. I
Yes,
do.
in what ways?
And here's why. Our government contractors had to realign their business, become more efficient. They've had to look at not only their core competencies, what makes sense to achieving their mission, but also what are the national priorities, and I've got to realign their business.
That's right. So they're more efficient. Anne?
What an exciting thing. We are now at the beginning of a new commercial space flight industry.
Oh, yeah.
Opening a huge opportunity.
How many millions do you
brand new
have? Are you going on that? With how many millions it costs? Do you have that in your back pocket?
I don't have it in my back pocket, no, but you know, SpaceX has launched. They're going to be carrying, you know,
Yeah.
these companies are now going to be carrying cargo
What was
to
it?
the International Space
850 billion? Was
Station.
It?
I mean, it's an amazing opportunity, and it's a new industry.
What do you think, Brad?
I think that if you look back 4 years ago and today, we now believe that we really can have far more unmanned systems, which means fewer people in harm's way, less costs
Yes,
associated with it.
excellent point.
And by and large, I think this was a turning point period in which we saw practical application that had been more theoretical or not widely dispersed at that
So
point.
beyond drones, in almost every aspect
Correct,
of the military, yes,
correct.
yeah. And if you look back, if pundits are going to look back one day, they're going to look back at 2012. What do you think, in just a few words, they're going to say about 2012? Gary, what are your few words?
In a few words?
Yeah, a few words.
Okay, I'll try. I think that they're going to look back and our inability for the political elements in government to make a decision to compromise and look for solutions that would really address the national priorities.
Worse than ever, yeah. Anne?
The first thing they're going to say is, wow, whoever would have thought we would now have as many drones at our civilian airports as we have commercial airliners?
Yeah.
And they're going to say, that strategic sourcing thing, you know, it worked really, really well, right up until we tried to apply it to services.
And what do you think, Brad?
Well, to key off of Ann's earlier comment, I think that commercial space, exploration, all of that flavor this was the turning point year. There were lots of in-flight demonstrations, and you can see that it will become a reality. And that's a very exciting thing.
It is. It's almost like Star Trek-wise, isn't it? What about singular words? Any words, just words that come into your mind about 2012? Any individual words that you would say? Sequestration. No one will
Yes.
ever forget. No one will ever forget
Uncertainty.
sequestration. Uncertainty,
Budget-
sequestration.
Budget pressures.
Yes.
Anxiety.
Anxiety, yeah. And you talked about earlier the employees. I mean, employees in America, I mean, across the board, and the
Across the board.
ramifications and the ripple effect from the whole
Exactly.
government
Across
contracting
the board.
industry.
And when you think about that, just put yourself in any employee's shoes, or as a CEO, the anxiety. How are the employees doing? What are they thinking? Are they going to be able to perform? Are they distracted?
Yeah.
You've got to provide
Morale.
stability, insight, and morale. You've got
Morale
to
is dreadful.
provide
What
that
about at
stability.
KPMG? How's KPMG doing? What are the people at KPMG and partners saying, and also employees?
Well, we're broadly speaking driven by the overall economy, and so it's a steady but anemic rate of growth. Audit is fairly stable, but I think we've seen advisory work grow, particularly as companies wrestle with how to perform better in what is a fairly modest growth environment.
So they really need your environment. And what about the dreaded words, the dreaded initials? Who likes LPTA? That was
what I was going to say. Cost. That's the word. That's the
Yes.
singular word. How can you drive cost out of your performance? How can you drive cost out? Frank Kendall at the Department of Defense. Drive cost out. Show me how you're doing it, and then you'll get the deal. Cost,
cost, but at the cost of the taxpayer, when ultimately lowest price technically acceptable. What is that? Who would buy a car that way? Who would hire a surgeon that way?
Well, but look at how the exploration to Mars was conducted by NASA.
Yeah,
they
right.
accomplished
That is-
something with incredibly low dollars because it's innovative thinking that takes that cost out
point,
by
Brad.
approaching it differently.
Yes,
right.
excellent point.
That's right. And what best price? What did it mean? I mean, I don't think that we're having any clearer definition than we did before. What we need to have is for the government to do something that it does not so well, which is to very, very carefully and strictly define its requirements if the lowest price technically acceptable contracting is to work.
Yeah, LPTA is just, most people just don't like it, but we have heard
But
through the year that it's reality.
It's a
Yeah, I was going to say it's
and that's
reality,
where
yes.
we are.
We have to be
and those
there.
companies that are coming in and they're disciplined, they're focused, they're trying to get out in front of those opportunities early on to shape the development of those requirements.
Don't bring me
And-
a
and-
bid.
and
Don't bring
anticipate
me a
it.
bid filled with bells and whistles.
No, right, it's
Don't
not
do
going to
it. Don't
fly.
do it
Won't
anymore.
fly. And that's what Brad has said
It's not
about
gonna
those people
happen.
that can plan. They're planning around LPTA, so they're planning around
and
it.
that's whether
right.
you're an incumbent or new entrant.
Yes.
You've got to get out in front. You've got to talk to your
Right.
customer. You've
And
got to
that's it.
understand how to help them
If you're
achieve
not,
their mission.
if you're not influencing
that's
the
it.
requirement.
For 2012, we will all forget LPTA, right? We'll never think about LPTA because it's going to be the way that it is. That's just going to be the way it is. So it's not something new. Thank you very much. All of you have given us just great perspectives this morning. That brings us to the end of this week's show. I want to thank our guests, Brad Waters from KPMG, who heads the advisory group, and Laurent from Bloomberg Government, and Gary Loyd from Centurion. All of us at Key Solutions are gratified by the tremendous feedback that has come to us from the government contracting viewing audience. Remember, our country couldn't function without your skills and your dedication. See you next week.
You've been watching Government Contracting Weekly, sponsored each week by AOC Key Solutions Incorporated. Government Contracting Weekly is the only television program devoted exclusively to the competitive and dynamic world of government contracting. For additional information, comments, questions, or suggestions, please write us at governmentcontractingweekly.com.